Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of No Strings Attached. Today, I have a pleasure of hosting Katy Shulaeva. And guys, before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you like this kind of content, I encourage you to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Katy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bogdan. Super excited to be here.
Love talking to coaches and especially former players turned coaches. So we're going to talk a lot about your former career, about your junior career, and obviously you as a coach. I want to start from the beginning as always. It's always interesting to hear how people got into tennis. So maybe you can share, how did you start?
I come from an athletic family. My dad played professional soccer. My mom was involved in different sports, especially gymnastics. And I had an older brother and older sister who were also into sports. So by the time I came along, it was kind of a no-brainer that for sure I was going to be in one sport or another in some sort of way. So, and my dad, right from the beginning, he would always kind of get me to participate in the family sporting activities and get me to do like little races against my older brother and sister and just kind of like stimulate that like competitiveness. And he saw I had a pretty good athletic ability and put me in different types of sports. And tennis was the one that really stuck out for me and the one that I was that I gravitated to, then that really I connected with. So
What did you attract what did attract you in tennis?
I'll be honest, right from the get-go, I really liked like the group of girls that I was with, and I like had a really good friend group, and I was like, oh, I really like coming here because I get to play tennis. I'm pretty good at it, and I get to see my friends. So that was a big part of it. And then I just did some school sports, but the only reason I think was those couple of friends that kept me coming back to the sport.
Wow, that's just talks to, importance of having more girls in tennis, because if we have more opportunities, more girls in the groups, maybe, we have more players. Not maybe, for sure, we gotta have more players and
Absolutely. And
more
they
coaches,
start in the
and
sport.
yeah.
Yeah, they start in the sport. They stay in the sport. That was definitely the case for me. In the beginning, it was very friend oriented, and then very quickly it became something more serious and, a big goal of mine, etc. But definitely the very early grassroots stage was like, I just enjoyed being there. I enjoyed being social with my friends.
When did you realize this is something more serious than just a hobby? When you like, okay, I want to compete, I want to win.
Mhm. I started at age 7, and I think pretty quickly within the first 2 years, I like the feeling of competition. I like the feeling of winning, working hard towards something, achieving it. So I was very naturally drawn to competition. I know that some younger girls, they shy away from it, but I think I was the one who was like, no, I love to win. I love to work hard. So I think within the first 2 years, I was I saw that there was some potential to go further. I had coaches and my parents, kind of encouraging me to set my goals high.
So was it your parents who initially like, hey, we want you to be very serious about tennis, and or it's more like you who said to them like, hey, you know what, guys, I think I'm gonna push here?
I think neither, to be honest. I think it was more my first coach who said to my parents, hey, she's got ability, she's got potential, she's got talent, and maybe there's something to this. So I think it was really the coach that first put that idea into my head, into my parents' head. And then I started to think, maybe this is something that I could pursue a little bit more serious.
Interesting. And was that in Canada?
That was in Canada. It was actually, it was Valery Golnick,
Okay.
the gentleman who runs Valan Tennis Academy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Oh, wow.
my first ever coach in the beginning, and I had such a positive experience with him, and he made it super fun, but competitive at the same time. And I think that first initial start was like kind of set the road for success to be able to continue the path of tennis.
Yeah, shout out to him, because again, like, how you start is so important. And I was talking to, I don't know if you watched that interview with oh my God, Catherine. I'm spacing out here.
Yes.
Catherine's, who also spoke highly of him. So that's pretty cool. That's two
Yeah, I actually
interviews in a row.
Yeah, I actually heard her podcast like just a couple of days ago, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's really cool that he's getting that shout out, 2
Yeah.
podcasts in a row. But yeah, he was
Wow,
my first start, and a very positive one at that.
that's amazing. So I'm gonna ask you, because she told as her story, her version, but I'm gonna ask you like, what was so positive, so encouraging, so motivating to you?
I'll be honest, it was so early on. I was there for maybe 2.5 years and then
Mhm.
moved elsewhere. I think what had happened, oh yes, I know that he had some family personal issues. So I was on court with him for about 2 years, and then his daughter took over. She took over for the
Mhm.
next 2 years. And then after that I went to, and then Pierre Lamarche was my coach after that. And the only thing I can remember is just honestly that it was fun. It was fun and competitive
Mhm.
from those early stages. I don't remember. I don't have a ton of memory between like the ages of 7 to 11 of what the tennis experience. I just remember being really positive and light and easy. But we also worked really hard. There was a
Yeah.
lot of discipline involved as well.
It's a fine balance, eh? Like to make sure that your practice is really fun, but at the same time, obviously, it's high performance. We're playing here. We're practicing to win, to get better. So it's very intense and competitive. But it's the key word is fun, right? So it's for coaches to get that balance is so tough.
Absolutely. And I've heard this before, and I'll say it again. It's like, and I really believe on it. Give the players a little bit less than what they want. So if they want to be playing, 6 hours a week, you only give them 5. You just keep them a little bit hungry and wanting to come back
Yeah.
for more. I think there's a real danger to do too much too soon. And I think in those early stages, it was like that perfect balance of I was playing other sports. I was really excited to come to tennis because I wanted more all the time. And I think every kid's going to need a different blueprint too. I mean, I don't think it's a one size fits all. Some girls
100%.
or some kids completely reject competition right from the outset. So maybe you need to incorporate that a little bit later. Some kids like myself just wanted more of it. So you can throw me a little bit more into the deep end with competition. I think you really have to customize it. I don't think it's a one size fits all approach.
100%. Touched on so many good points. But what sports did you play other than tennis?
In school, I did a lot of track. I
Mhm.
did, I remember, it's funny actually, I loved football, like touch football.
Okay.
But I loved playing with the boys. Like we always had co-ed teams. I think I even did a little bit of basketball. It was all very casual, but in school, but oh, soccer, that was a big one too. But yeah, so and I wish I would have actually continued to do those sports for longer. The way
Mhm.
that things are now, it's like we understand that early sports specialization is not the way to go, and the kids should be playing more sports for longer, developing their athletic skills, becoming an athlete first versus a tennis player first. I think that's really neat, and I think I
Mhm.
would have benefited from that as well. But so yeah, just a little bit of school sports on the side until I really started to pursue tennis full time at probably 10 years old.
Okay, so you're saying you stopped playing other sports at 10? Sorry, did I
Yes.
understand that
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Like, well, I wonder what would have happened, if I played longer, like other sports, and it's like
Hmm.
it's interesting to kind of um think about it. So you went to Pierre Lamarche. So can you describe how was it working with him? What do
Well,
you remember? What
you know
stuck?
Pierre. I think he's
Of
been on your
course.
podcast as well.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
one of the longest, I think, if not the longest podcast.
that doesn't
We
surprise me. He's got
we
a lot
talked
to
for like
say.
2 hours. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he's got a lot to say. And you know what? He's been Pierre, as everybody knows him, he's a Canadian tennis legend.
Yeah.
And he's had his hands in everything. And he's been around so long. He's seen the evolution of so many players. So it was just, I think it was my dad who started asking around,
Hmm.
and somebody said, Pierre Lamarche is the guy to go to, and he's the one who develops tennis players in Canada. And I remember showing up to tennis and being absolutely scared out of my mind of this like
Hmm.
big personality, physically big guy with a deep voice. And but he just has such a way about him, and he has such a presence. As you know, he's now in his
Yeah.
70s and he still has the exact same presence. Like that hasn't changed at all. He's Pierre, he's larger than life. So
Hmm.
Pierre had a great setup. I mean, I had never been to an academy before. Tons of players, tons of courts, tons of
Hmm.
coaches. I mean,
Yeah.
all the resources at your fingertips. It's like it felt like you were arriving to a real place that really valued tennis as the main thing. Whereas before it was just like we're just trying to find courts here and there. But now it's
Yeah.
like this is a destination. So and very quickly, Pierre, said very similar things to my parents. This is an athlete that has a lot of potential, and I'm really willing to work with her and see how it was going to work. So at the beginning, I was very intimidated, and it took me some while to get used to Pierre's style. It's a unique one. But then, you know what? He ended up being my coach for the rest of my career,
Wow.
up until from 11 to 20, from 11 to 22.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Talking about,
with,
one message, eh? Like
yeah,
sticking to one coach to act.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty remarkable part of my story as well. It's like you don't hear that very often, that's for sure.
No, and can we stop on that for a little bit? Because I find it so fascinating. You, especially right now, the dynamic of the high performance in Canada, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do 2 days here, 2 days there. I have three coaches. I have a serving coach. It's like, what? Yeah, you hear
Hmm.
all kinds of crazy stories. But even like two coaches, it's just like, what are we doing here? So, like, can we talk about the importance of having that one message, and maybe you can draw from your own experience to elaborate on that? Like, how did that help you having just one coach, one voice?
I think having gone through it as a player and now spent some, last 15 years coaching, I think it's so inherently important that there is one message, but I do think that there is a lot of value in collaboration with other coaches. I think one message, your player will never get confused. That's for sure. And it's very consistent, and the messaging, and it needs to be at some point, especially when you're developing game style and personality and behaviors on court. I think it's so important. But I also do think that there's a big spot of like, if maybe you have one main person and then everybody else, you bring people into like, okay, maybe you're not the big technical guy. Maybe you bring in somebody that's really good with technique. Hey, a new pair of eyes on this. What do you think about this part on the serve? I am, but the message stays consistent. It's not like you're going to a
Yeah,
different coach, but they're all working together.
yeah.
But the way that players are doing it nowadays, where, like you said, 1 day here, 2 days there, I mean, I can't imagine that that's anything other than confusing. However, maybe they're going to those other players, other training facilities just for volume, and they are still receiving that one main message
Hmm.
tactically or technically. I don't really know. I think each
Of
case is
course,
unique.
we're generalizing, right? So it's just that's
Yes.
what we see in general. So for sure, there is some value in attending like a point clinic, maybe at some academy,
Hmm.
and just like going for actual like tactical coaching, and like tactical coaching, you have your private coach at one place and points otherwise,
And
right?
don't get me
So
wrong. I think I was an extreme example of staying with one coach for a long time.
yeah.
I mean, what was it? It was, and I stopped at 22, and who knows, that could have been longer. But I think there's a ton of value of sticking with the same coach, especially one that believes in you, that and you're
Mhm.
striving towards the same goal. I think jumping around a lot can definitely have some detriments, but I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing here is the importance of coaches believing in their players, which just sounds like, well, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? But I just remember, from when I was at Tennis Canada, and when I was just traveling around, and too many coaches too early just write people off, and because obviously our goal is, we're always thinking Grand Slams, we're always thinking like Wimbledon and like top 100 and whatever, and too many times I feel like we're just write kids off too early. And for me to hear, and I know the feeling because I'm like that on the court as well, like, for me to hear like at 9 or at 8 when you were with Valeri, and with 10 when you went to, like, they believed in me right away. They saw the potential. And how much empowering that is for a player,
I
like, that's just crazy, right? Like, it just gives you wings, not to steal Red Bull's tagline here.
I think you said it so well. I really don't think I would have had the career that I had, and I mean, it wasn't very long, but I don't think I would have gotten to the point where I got if it wasn't for that belief from my coach. And you saying like it gives you wings, absolutely. I think the life of a tennis player, a high achieving tennis player, is so filled with like grief and strife and difficult moments and lonely moments and injury and doubt. There's so much of that along the way. And if you have your support system, whether that's your coach or your parents, or I don't know what it is for different people, but if you always have that like beacon that always believes in you, I mean, in your lowest, darkest moments, you can always, even though when you don't believe in yourself, they believe in you. And I honestly, I can just speak for myself. I would have not made it to the point where I made it to if it wasn't for Pierre, just having that unwavering abundance of belief in me, as well as my parents. But they just kind of, they understood. They said that he is the expert and he sees something and we know you as a person. But if he sees something in your talent, then, you know, we believe him and we know your character and we believe in you. But it's, I don't know. I don't know if coaches speak that way to their players, like they believe in them. But I think it's something that players so desperately need just because the journey is so difficult and it is so long. And sorry to touch back on what you said, we write players off early. It's compared to when I was playing 18 years ago, the pathway is so different now and it could look so different for players. It used to be back when I was playing, if you went to school, that was the death sentence for your career. If you went to school, you're never playing professional tennis. So at 17, you must make a decision. Am I going to school on a scholarship or am I playing pro? And players are not faced with that same gravity of decision anymore. You see tons of examples now of players who are choosing to go to school for 1 year, choosing to go to school for 2 years, sometimes finishing school, and then, you know, pursuing their careers after that. So I think you can't write people off way too early. Everybody develops at different stages. I know that even their interest in tennis can fluctuate. You know, maybe later in a few years' time, then they have a real passion. They found, wow, I'm really into this tennis thing. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. Let's talk about Pierre. We talked about him quite a bit right now, but I just want to really ask you, like, what do you remember? Like, if you're, I hate when people ask me that kind of question, like, give me like top 3, you know, or like top 5, like takeaways, like, but really like the most important takeaways from working with Pierre. What do you remember? What are the lessons?
Like tennis lessons or like life
Anything,
lessons?
just anything that sticks. That's still till this day, like you said, like it was a while ago. So so what comes up?
Pierre's big message to me was always that you need to develop yourself as a person. Because if you develop yourself as a person, you're going to develop as a tennis player. And he was big on like, you need to be a good person. You need to be a good person on the court. You need to be a good person off the court. Your values are your everything. He always said that, you know, I don't work with players that don't have good values or families that don't have good values because it doesn't sit well with me. And so, and he was always, and we were like a family. Like my family would go over to his house often, and he'd have other. I mean, he does that. He has a way of bringing people together, making them feel like it's a family. And so number one, I would say is the value system. The next thing, when you get knocked down, get back up again. I think he had a saying. What was it? Get knocked down twice, get up 3 times. Something like that, like resilience. I guess the number 2 would be resilience, more than anything. And the third was, I would really say, humor. Like he's like, you know, tennis is full of ups and downs. You got to find. We had a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. We joked around a lot. So there was a lot of humor also. And he said, you know, you're gonna have difficult days, but you got to remember to just, you know, make a joke, keep it light, and keep it moving. So that would be the main like non-tennis messages I would say that really stuck with you as you move away from playing tennis and more into life.
Before I ask you what kind of tennis messages do you remember, I just want to bring our listeners' attention to, like, anytime I ask this question to former players, to players, like, what do they remember from working with this coach, that coach? It's never the forehand topspin or whatever, the wide serve, or, you know, it's never the footwork. It's always like some values, and and actually, like, it spoke so, you know, true to what we just talked about. Like you mentioned how for Pierre it's so important to have values, and then the first things that you say, it's all about values and all about those things. So it's like that's exactly what, I think all the good coaches are doing. They're focusing on you as a person first, and you as a just a good human being, developing that side. And then tennis, of course, they know their tennis stuff, and of course they have to be good tacticians and technicians, but it's always those things first, because they really understand the necessity of that. So I just wanted to stop and just really make sure that everybody just make an
Understands
accent
that
on
point.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it fascinates me every single time, no matter whether it's on podcast or just like in person. I'm asking somebody. It's always values. It's always these personal experiences that come out, which is fascinating. So when you guys are looking
Hmm.
for your coach, that's so important. Like your child is spending so much time with that person, so it better be that the values align. I
Hmm.
won't stop,
Absolutely.
repeating this because it's so important. But
And I think the um sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yes. So as far as the values go, I think as coaches, it's not just parents who are listening to this. I think coaches that are listening to this,
yeah,
reminding us that the words we say and the messages that we download they stay with them sometimes for a lifetime. And, we have a lot of responsibility to when we say certain things, like we don't know how it's going to land and what kind of a profound impact that can have on somebody, on somebody's development as an actual human being. And I think like that, the fact that we're charged with that responsibility, it's pretty cool. And I hope that coaches take it seriously. It's not just forehands and backhands, but it's also very cool to think that our job, we have a chance to make a big impact on these kids. And how special is that? I mean, how many jobs out there get to do that and get to shape human beings and their future value systems? So, and it's always really rewarding when somebody you've coached, you've had, I'm sure, tons of examples, comes back to you and they're now in university or a full grown adult, and they say things like, hey, when I was this age and you helped me, and this really, you showed me the way, or you believed in me. It's like, wow. Yeah, I cannot believe that I had such an impact on somebody at that age. Yeah, so grateful to be in a space to be able to do that.
yeah, that's very powerful. We should never forget about like the opportunities we have to shape someone's life every day.
Hmm.
Anything tennis wise that you remember
From
from Pierre?
Pierre.
Yeah.
Hmm. Pierre his big thing was tactics. It was who is in front of you and how do you use your game to unravel their game, figure out what their weaknesses are, make them feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of talk about tactics. That was number one for sure. Um, Pierre really valued, at least in my game, he said you need to have variety. And I think that was because I didn't have the biggest forehand or the biggest backhand. I mean, I think most of my strengths were like my athletic ability and my mental strength.
Mhm.
So he said, you've got to have variety. You need to develop a slice. You need to be
Mhm.
comfortable certain volleying when you need to. You need to be able to come into the net, changing the heights of the ball and the speeds of the ball, because I wasn't going to blow anybody away with my power, my raw power. I just didn't have
Mhm.
that. So there was a lot of talk about variety. So variety, tactics, and then the next thing tennis wise, I would say is there was a lot of work around the serve. And
Mhm.
again, variety in your serve. So it was very important to him that I developed a kick serve. I remember being 12 and, skinny little girl and, starting to work on the biomechanics of a kick second serve. And at that time, I was like the only one doing that. It's a little bit more
Mhm.
common to start that stuff earlier, but like at the time, it was like that was almost like you do that when you're strong enough, or mostly guys did that. Girls kind of had more of a
Mhm.
slice second serve. So variety in my serve would be, I think, the third thing there was a lot of focus on.
Yeah, and just looking at the WTA circuit right now, like how many more girls, women serve, all kinds of serves, different varieties. So in a lot of ways, like he was ahead of his time, because that's true. That was the narrative back then. It's like, because I remember I was like just a young coach and I was just learning, and I heard like, oh, like, she's not strong enough yet, or like but it's all technical, right?
Yes.
It has nothing to do, like right now I'm working with like 9-year-old girls for topspin serve who are very petite. I mean, they're 9, they're small, but they're serving topspin. So
you just use progressive ways. You use
yeah,
feel,
exactly.
right? Like you can
Yeah,
start
exactly.
introducing that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
wait
So
until they're strong enough in their shoulders to start that. You start that early. Yeah.
yeah, it's like since we touched on that, it's always fascinating to me that like back then there were so many like these weird stigmas, about tennis, about gender, like differences and all that stuff. Makes me always want to like think like, what about now?
Yeah. What stigmas are we creating now?
Yeah, what are we doing
Yes.
now that we're not aware of, that 10 years from now we're going to be like, or next generation, like in 20 years,
Yes.
is going to be like, oh, those old guys.
Totally.
They used to,
You remember that
yeah,
old school way they used to do that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't
I'm
believe
sure
they were
there's a
teaching
bunch.
topspin to 9-year-olds, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing it with 4-year-olds now. It's like,
It's a good one.
or
Oh, that's
whatever.
really
It's like,
good. That's really good. I'm sure
but
there's
it's
a bunch of things we're doing wrong. I'm sure that the
yeah,
next generation is going to nail and be way better than us, but that's how it should be. It's kind of like the natural evolution of things, right? Like when you just
yeah,
look at sports science, like sports science, what it was 20 years ago to what
that's
it is
true.
now. It's like the strides are incredible. In another 20 years, it's like it's going to be another huge leap, right? So I think that's the
Yeah,
natural way. But yeah, you're right. It's good to kind of reflect and be like, what am I doing now that I'm
yeah,
going to be made fun of for later?
it's true. We'll find out in someone
Yeah.
else's podcast.
Yeah.
Um, okay, bringing back our conversation to your career, to your junior career, we're still there. You won nationals. Am I right? Did I read that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Several times.
which years? Which age category?
I won 16s and eight. I think I won 16s twice and 18s twice, and then doubles as well. So singles,
Mhm.
I think it was singles twice on 16s, singles twice in 18, and doubles once in 16s and 18s. I played 14s back in
Mhm.
my day. This is, I'm aging myself. Back in my day, we didn't have under 12 nationals.
Okay,
That only came later. I did play 14 nationals, but I think I was like third or something. That's my best result.
okay,
My
so
results
still
came in
very
the
close.
upper categories. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so what do you think made you a successful junior player? Like just looking back, maybe like what did you have that maybe girls who finished like top 5, top 10, top 30, like what was the
What was the
difference?
difference? Yeah.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, it wasn't my ability to blow my opponent off the court. I didn't have that. I was very strong mentally, and I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to get the win. I was willing to stay out there for 3 hours. If the hotter the day was, like I felt like was more to my advantage because I'm like, I'm willing to fight harder than you are to get the win. So that was a big part of it. I think my mental resiliency was at times better than my counterparts at that age. And I think I was so consistent. I just like when the moment mattered, like I just didn't miss. And that's huge, when there's pressure and everything, and people don't want to be in a long point, so I would just draw at the point and make it last longer. And as I got older, I got the ability to take the ball early, and I put a pressure on my opponents through that, like taking the ball really early. So I think it's a combination of those, like mental resiliency. I was just willing to die out there for better or for worse. I put a lot of balls in the court, and then like taking the ball early. I think that overwhelmed my opponents at that age.
Where is that coming from? I'm just always curious, like why certain people are, obviously sometimes it comes from parents, from, like you said, you had the pretty athletic family backgrounds, and a lot of times I see kids who are like that, and their parents are like, we don't know where is this coming from. So how do you explain that? Like, where did you get this from? Like, was it from the family, or was it you felt like you were always like that?
A great question. I can't say that I, endured some crazy hardship as a kid and I had to learn to be resilient. No, I had a very charmed, happy childhood. I think a part of it is really your character and who you are on the inside, and the other part is the people around it that shape it. But I think the messaging was always in our household was, you need to work hard. If you want to achieve anything great, you need to work really hard. You need to be strong. You know, I think again, back to the value system, what we talked about, the values that my parents passed down, were very consistent with the values that helped me to shape me to have tennis success for sure. But that being said, we have 3 kids in our family, and everybody's personality is very different.
Yeah.
But I think at the core, everybody's like pretty tough and pretty resilient. And when the going gets tough, like we kind of dig our heels in and we push harder. So I think that all can't be, then there needs to be some nurture over nature. So I guess thanks to my parents.
Yeah, no, for sure. Shout out to all parents because again, like the foundation is is starting from you guys. And we talked already about it, but just want to double down on that point that make sure that your coach mirrors your values. Sorry, not mirrors, but rather like has the same values. Aligns, the aligns. So I don't want to confuse people like with the mirror analogy, but exactly, just make sure it's the same values that you're nurturing in your child, because that's when I think you have the same message like we talked about. It's the double effect of what you're trying to nurture. Okay, so you're this national champion, you're on top of the country as a tennis player, and then you're trying to make it to the pro tour, right? You're trying to be playing your, that's completely different game, right? So can you talk a little bit about you thinking, or maybe you didn't think like that, but you're being top player in Canada, and then all of a sudden you're trying to, establish yourself.
To transition to pros,
yeah, transition to pro. It's very tough, right? It's like, that's when we all hear like it's a completely different game, and it's just so different. So how was it different for you? What were your experiences?
My experience was definitely, as soon as I started playing professional events, is that first of all, like physically, you're playing against grown women. I think at that stage, I was still kind of developing physically. So you're playing against these people that are bigger and stronger than you. So right away, the physicality is very, very different. The speed of their ball was very different. Everybody's so serious and so dedicated. Nobody's there to make friends. Super lonely. Like you're not going there to make friends. Nobody's welcoming you with open arms. Welcome to the tour. No, it's like, get out of here, right? It's like, we don't want you here. So that was kind of a big awakening for me. And to be honest, I don't think I was prepared for that. And looking back on it now, if I had, if I was passing some words of wisdom to coaches that have players transitioning, I would say you need to prepare them for what's out there so that when they get out there, they're not as shell-shocked as I was. I thought it was going to just be like a really smooth transition. Like, here I go from like a junior to a pro. I was the top in my country. Therefore, I'm just going to have this really... So I was a bit shell-shocked when I came on the tour. And I struggled. I struggled with a little bit of like the physicality and the game style change. People had the big ball that I couldn't replicate. So that was a struggle. But to be honest, I was plagued with a lot of injuries, which is why my career ended early at 22. And it was hard for me not just to transition into a whole new world, but also not being able to stay healthy for a long enough period of time to get comfortable. It was always like I was on the road for 6 months and then I'd be off for 6 months and then be like, okay, now let me go play tournaments for 6 months. Okay, that was off for 6. It's like I never quite got the confidence. I never got my feet out from under me. So that was, I think, a personal challenge that I had that not every player has, and hopefully very few players have.
What do you think made you injured? Looking back at it.
Great question. I was hoping this was going to come up because, again, people listen to this and it's like, okay, let me draw on my experiences. Maybe somebody can take something from this. I played way too much tennis. I was so injured because I was overtraining. I just had this mentality of I need to work harder than everybody. I need to be on the court longer than everybody. I need to be at the gym longer than everybody. You know, if I really want to make it, I have to do more than everybody else. This was my mentality.
Which, when you listen to this, doesn't sound as such a bad
So
idea.
bad.
But it doesn't sound like, it's like, well, if I want to be the best, I have to train the most, right? So that's gonna.
Yeah.
But
so in my case, it actually had the opposite effect. I think there are some body types and that can take more beating than others. And I know because I've had this conversation with like the experts, like Kristaps Petrovs. I don't know if you know Kristaps.
Of course, I had him on my podcast too.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Yeah. Anyways, he's unbelievable. He really knows his stuff. Talk about somebody that's an expert in their field, right? And I've had this conversation with him before, and he said that there's certain types of body types that can just take a lot more beating, and you know, these specific types of body, you need to be more careful with overtraining with these kinds of body types. And it's like this information wasn't available when I was playing. It was just like whoever works the hardest is going to be the one that ends up on top. And I was like, no, I'm going to be on top, so I'm going to work the hardest and the most. So overtraining was the reason for a lot of my injuries. And yeah, if I could say anything to coaches, fitness trainers, it's like I think the number one goal should be preventing injury versus like getting stronger, getting faster, because that injury is going to set you back so far, and not just time away on the court, but it's like it impacts the player mentally too. You lose you erodes at your confidence like you wouldn't even believe. Yeah, so that was my reason for a lot of injuries.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the sport science has advanced so much, and with, you know, it's like at 8 years old, for example, or at 9 years old, kids have access to fitness coaches who are so smart, who know so much more about development, you know, and back then, it's like, that's when I think we just started seeing this transition of people not just spending time on the court, but spending more time in the gym, and sometimes equally in the gym to what they spend. That's what the stats say from the tour. Like they spend like about 50-50, you know, depending, of course, like it's very individual. So yeah, I think with the access to sports science, of course, you have to find the right people. There's no need to overtrain. There is no, like, that's not how this is so old school, like, you know, it's just like
it
that
is.
doesn't
It's
work.
like
It doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm like a living, breathing example of that, of like the player who's willing to run through the wall. But no, like if you have somebody that has that mentality, you need to educate them. You need to explain it to them. You need to make them think about longevity. I had longevity in all of my planning, like all of our long-term goal setting. We never talked about short-term. Always talked about long-term. But we kind of missed that part about like, okay, well, we need to make sure that you physically can last long-term. So yeah. Anyways, it just that's learned from my lessons.
So when you say you play too much, you overtrain, like, can we put a number to this?
Oh, good question.
Can we be more specific? Do you remember how many hours you trained a week?
Something right away just sticks out in the top of my head. I never had a day off where I didn't do anything physical. Oh, so I think I played 6 times a week. I think, okay, let me think the hours. Probably 4 to 5 hours a day on the court. 4 to 5 hours a day on the tennis court for 5 days a week, and then probably like 2 hours in the gym on top of that. And then yeah. And then on like the Saturday, it would be like, okay, I'm only going to train like 2 hours that day and 1 hour in the gym. And then on Sunday,
sounds like a day off, right?
Right. And then Sunday, like my day off was like, you need to go for a run, like a long distance run. And it's like, and I think that to that now, and I'm like, oh my God, my poor body, like never had a chance. I never gave it real physical rest, and I never learned to even communicate like, I'm tired, I'm sore, I need to look inwards. And I had to learn that much later on in my adult years, even to understand, okay, what does sore mean? What is tired? What does a break mean? Because for the first 22 years of my life, I just want to go, 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 go. So I think having those conversations with your players and be like, assess your body. What do you need? well, how do we need to customize this? Are you, lower load week, a higher load week? We didn't have that. It
Yeah.
was just like go, 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 go all the time. So yeah, those are the numbers.
Which is so weird, because nobody does that in any other industry. Like people have time off, like even like highly successful people, they take that time off to recharge, they understand the importance of that, which is like mind blowing to me, because a lot of, especially nowadays, like and I'm talking about parents mostly who are pushing their kids to play in this day and age, like play no day off, like they're successful people. Like you can afford tennis 7 days a week. You're doing really good in your life. So you're achieving that success. Are you working as hard as your kid is working? And in some cases, maybe you are, and maybe that's kind of like, that's why you're doing that. But I doubt that that most of the parents who do that, they're and by working, I don't mean answering emails. Like I mean like full on, you're at your job like 7 hours a day, 8 hours. I bet you're not doing that. So why are we doing that?
But yet your kid is doing that.
Yeah.
At
I
don't know.
10
You
or
tell me,
12,
is this happening? I mean, is this happening? Do you still see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Like like without naming names, but we have
That's unfortunate.
People at the top of the ranking nationally, at 14, at 12, like who are doing that. So, yeah, it's still happening, and it's just mind blowing. I just don't understand, with so much education around, with so many knowledgeable people around those people, it's still happening. And like we said, there's like, okay, because I have this argument on Instagram with somebody. Well, what if my kid can take it? And I'm like, okay, one kid out of 1,000 maybe will survive, and he will thrive, and maybe that's what he needed. But the rest will break down. So as a coach,
why gamble with that?
Yeah, I'm not taking that risk. I'm sorry. Like as a coach personally, if you as a parent want to do that to your kid, that's your choice. I mean, who am I to tell you how to raise your kid? But at the same time, it's like, sure, I agree that there's like certain percentage of, and that's why we talked about it as well. Like you have to be very personalized, right, with your approach, and kind of engage it and measure. But are you actually measuring it? Or are you just kind of whatever? So most of the time it's like, oh, we have to be the best. Oh, but you said tennis is serious for you, so we're gonna play 7 days a week, 5 hours a day. So let's go. And I just don't understand. Like again, there's so much information around, like so many coaches around who are good, who know that, who talked about it. And that's again one of the reasons I also created this podcast, is just because it's the same message. I could have just recorded one episode and that's it. Because it's honestly, it's been like more than 30 episodes. It's the same message.
You must be getting bored.
No, I'm not, because the conversation is always exciting. It always takes us somewhere else. But at the same time, it's like, I just really want to make sure that people hear this. If so many experts, if so many coaches, former players, fitness trainer, like physios, if all of them are saying this, it's not a conspiracy, you guys.
Yeah.
It's the same message, because that's what's, scientifically the right thing to do. That's it. Like,
that's why it's so cool what you're doing. Is like you're spreading that information out there. You're getting that. So people that are willing and open, they'll take those messages on. And if they're not willing and open, that's fine. But I think that's really cool that you put this platform out there and you get to spread that information to people, and then they can make the choice.
Yeah.
Right.
I always, when I was a younger coach, I always complained, like, well, all these parents, they don't, like, why do they oh my God, I'm losing my my mind right now. Why do they do this? Why do they do this? Well, how come they don't do that? And I'm like, well, there's no information really for them, other than, if we don't tell them, they don't know. So that's kind of one of the reasons this also podcast was born, is to give a voice to coaches, and to make sure that our coaches are known, and to create like a catalog of Canadian coaches, physios, fitness trainer, facilitator, like anybody, like as much as I can, as much as people want to do it. And then B is just for the parents to actually know, like if they're in British Columbia or if they're in Toronto area and they research, oh, there is this coach in Richmond Hill. Oh, there's an interview with him. Great. So they
Let me
listen
get to
for
know
an
him a little
hour.
bit.
Yeah, it gives you, okay, of course you're gonna want to still spend some time with him in person or her in person and chat, but still it gives you like 1 hour of an idea what kind of person that he is or she is. So anyway, but now that's not about that. So let's go back to Katy Shulaeva. Yeah.
No, I was happy to hear
So
about Bogdan. I was happy to hear about it.
yeah, no, it's yeah. Sometimes it comes up a little bit, but I remember I started a podcast with Alistair, and before I even ask him you know how Alistair is. So before I even ask him the first question, he's like, "Oh no, hold on a second, I'm gonna interview you now instead." I was like, "Whoa!" So we first 50 minutes he was like asking me questions. Anyway, so you retired. Now you stopped playing quite early, like you said. Did you start coaching right away, or did you have a break? I'm assuming you had a break, like just a wild guess.
I'll be honest. When I officially hung up my racket and said my body can't do this anymore and this is not working, I had a bit of a, I think I had a little bit of a crisis internally, because my whole life up till that point I had this goal, and I'm going to achieve this goal, and I'm going to become one of the best tennis players in the world, and your entire life is guiding this goal. Every decision you make is towards this goal. And so when that goal is no longer there, and it's one thing when your career slowly peters out and you're like, oh, I can kind of see it coming. You start thinking about the future. Mine was pretty abrupt, pretty sudden. It was much shorter, career than anybody had imagined, especially myself. So I was very unprepared for life without tennis. And I don't even mean tennis. I mean life not being a tennis player, not being a high achieving tennis player. I was having a little bit of an identity crisis, and I was like, who am I? What is even, what am I doing now? I felt like I had I had my whole life in front of me, but it felt like doom, because again, so this is another thing, is like, talk to your players about what life looks like after tennis. And, because things do happen and you need to prepare them for the inevitability that tennis ends, and develop their confidence that they'll be okay without tennis.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Because I think you're touching on such a great point, and unfortunately, obviously fortunately you're sharing it with us, but unfortunately it's your experience back then, and it's tough to talk about it, and I appreciate you sharing this because I'm sure it helps somebody who's listening to the show. But I think it's very crucial that we as coaches and as parents who are willing to help their kid, we provide those opportunities and we show them what life looks like if tennis is not there, by giving them, for example, a day off, like we talked about here. And in that day off, they can do whatever they want. Maybe they
Explore
go with their
interests.
They go out with their friends and they take a bunch of pictures, and photography is kind of cool, or whatever. Or so just like for them to have some time to be kids and to be individuals and explore and find some hobbies and make friendships and realize, go to movies, movies are cool. Oh, how do you make movies? Oh, I don't know. So just to get this like interest and get this curiosity from the world around them, because like you said, if there's only tennis in life, like once tennis is over, it's very common among tennis players in general. But like I think that could help prevent that. Sorry to interrupt,
completely agree.
Yeah.
No, you didn't interrupt me. I think when you're playing tennis 7 days a week, it's pretty hard to find free time to develop who you are and what are your interests outside of tennis. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. I think at the end of this, you realize that a tennis career is only so long, and then you've got the rest of your life to live after that. So if you're a parent or you're a coach, you are responsible to make sure that they're okay after that. I think you want to make sure that they're okay after that. So along the way, And I think lo and behold, as you're developing interests in other areas and ideas, I actually think it's going to help your tennis. I think the more well-rounded you become, you can actually become a more mature, better tennis player. It's so indirectly, it's going to help your tennis. So, so yeah, it's a big identity crisis when I was done tennis. And so I wanted nothing to do with tennis. I was like, I'm done. I don't want to even look at a tennis racket. I don't need to see a tennis court. I'm like, get me as far away from the sport as possible. To be honest, I think I was a little bit traumatized with like the ending of it all. And I just didn't do. I was just like, I'm just going to put my head in the sand and pretend, this thing doesn't exist. Super healthy, right? So, but then how did I get into coaching? It was just sheer luck, to be honest. I finished tennis. I didn't want to do anything. I had plans to go to school. I had enrolled in some college somewhere. I don't know. And while I was waiting to go to school, Pierre says, hey, just come teach a few hours during the summer before you go to school. Earn a little bit of money. Come teach a few hours. Reluctantly, I said yes. I was bored at home. I was doing nothing. So I just went to go teach a few hours and honestly never looked back since then. I found myself being useful on the court. It was nice to feel like, hey, I have some ability at this. I can help other people. I can give back to the sport a little bit. I actually enjoy being on the tennis court in a different capacity other than just like pushing myself physically as hard as I could to reach my goal. So then I decided to pause the school thing for a little while. And you know what? I'm really glad I did. And now it's 15 years later. Yeah. So I've been in coaching for the last 15 years. So I probably owe it to Pierre that I'm a tennis coach. If he hadn't invited me to come teach a couple hours at his academy.
This Pierre guy, huh? Like
I know, right?
What an impactful guy he is.
Yeah, he's a very impactful guy for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He started you as a player. He believed in you as a player. Then he believed in you as a coach.
Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How many coaches can say that? Developing a player and a coach.
The whole. I was going to say it's a complete circle.
Complete circle. That's right. That's fascinating. So you've been coaching for, like you said, like around 14, 15 years now, which is fascinating. And you are at the Toronto Lawn right now, correct?
Yeah, at the Toronto Lawn right now.
Perfect. So I just want to ask you, like, because obviously you're not the same coach right now that you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So can you maybe talk about a couple things that changed you as a coach? Maybe a couple things that maybe you're not doing now that you were before, so that maybe other coaches could draw from that and could take your experience.
Yes, absolutely. I'm certainly not the coach I was even, I think, 3 years ago that I am today. I think when I entered coaching, I didn't know anything. I mean, I had my playing background, but that's not much to go on to coaching. I really didn't know anything, and I just kind of was going on what I knew, which wasn't much. And the things that really changed me were, I would have to say the biggest change, honestly, in my coaching would probably be 6 years ago when I started to become a course facilitator. This was the biggest change for me. I hadn't gone through the traditional coaching certification route that everybody else goes through. I was accelerated through my coaching certification. I think they were just really keen to get some woman certified and coaching. There was so little representation back then. I mean, there's a little bit more now, but there was like zero before. So they're like, here you go, here's your coaching certification, just like get out there.
Please stay in the sport.
Yeah, please stay in the sport. Exactly. We'll do anything to keep you. And that was a little bit of it wasn't great for my coaching education, that's for sure. And once I, started to do a little bit of coaching certification, I got invited back. I actually started learning alongside with the other coaches who were in the course. I was like helping to deliver the course, but I was learning so much, and I continue to this day. Like every time I do a course, I'm doing coach 2 and coach 3 currently right now, alternating the years. Every time I come out, I'm like, I am a better coach. I'm a better human. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I'm going home. I'm trying these things. I'm developing ideas. So I'm kind of, when you guys go through the coaching certification, you go through coach 2 once. I'm like, I've now been through it 3 times. I'm like, I'm kind of lucky. I kind of keep like getting to be a little bit better and building and building and building every time. So I think that's been a huge impact on my coaching. Because I didn't have a ton of tools to draw on from before besides my playing background. So so now I just have a little bit more confidence, and I'm still discovering like what my style is, I think, and always adapting it to the people in front of me. I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of went on a tangent
for
there.
sure. No, for sure it does. Because I think I forgot who told me that. Could have been Andy Sutton, but it's like when you have to teach, that's how you really know.
Oh,
Like
yes.
you test yourself, like, like that's how you really, like, I'm forgetting, like I'm butchering it like big time, but
There's like a pyramid that they use, and the
that's right.
first
There's
way,
a pyramid.
yeah.
So like
What's the
if you
most effective
teach,
way of learning?
that's right.
Yes.
That's right. That's
hmm
what it is. So when you teach, it's like you learn the most.
Yes.
So
I think the
that's what
first one is I think the first one is like reading about it. The next one is like watching it. The next one is doing it. And then I think it's teaching is definitely at the bottom. Like that's the way you learn the fastest
That's
is
right.
by teaching it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 100,000% truth. And it's always, as long as you have an open mind, right? Like if for all the coaches listening to us and maybe younger coaches, 100%, like it's super important that you keep your open mind, and it doesn't stop. Like you said, you're still discovering your style, and for somebody who's been teaching for like 15 years, like I'm
hmm
still discovering my style. It's so humbling. It's just great to hear. I think it's a great message for everybody, really.
Yeah.
So
I think I've
I can relate
done
to that 100%.
yeah, I mean, it's anything. You want to you want to stay open, you want to stay creative, you want to stay flexible. I think I've done 5 or 6 years of course facilitation now, and
hmm
I'm still learning. I'm like up there, supposed to be like one of the experts, put that in
hmm
quotation marks. But the first thing we say all the time is that we don't know everything. We're learning from you as
Yeah.
much as you're learning from us. So, and that rings true every time I do one of these courses. So, super grateful and lucky to be a part of that and to help other coaches around the country. I think that's
hmm
I don't know if you've ever been involved with course facilitation, but
I started doing instructor course
okay.
last year. I think,
Okay.
yeah, it was last. So it's been like a year, and I did maybe like 5 courses, something like that.
Okay.
So not a lot, but still, like even like at the first level of the certification of our like coaching, system, it's still like I remember the first course I was just shadowing Andy, and he's just like, you know, explaining some was it like it's like a fundamental demonstrations, and he's
Okay.
like, okay, we're gonna talk about contact point, and he's like, there's four elements to contact point. I was like, oh wow, there's 4 elements. It's like, I'm
Yeah,
like,
you're like
because
taking notes. You're taking
yeah, I'm
notes.
I'm taking notes, and I'm like, like, listen, like hugging my racket, standing in line, because I was like, oh, there's four, and then he starts like, you know, basically like saying them, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I know about them, but like, like he's like so structured and everything in his delivery, and I was like, I'm coaching them obviously, and I'm talking about all of them. But I'm like, okay, when I had to really like relearn the material, because obviously I had my instructor course, I passed it back then, but it's just so funny because like you as a coach, you're doing your thing, you're in your world, in your motion, but then you go to deliver and you're like, oh wow, this is like, it's
Can
very
I name those
structured. It's
four
like,
things?
yeah,
Yeah.
can I, and you, if he were to ask me that, like I wouldn't be able to tell you.
hmm It
With
becomes so
guidance maybe.
automatic at some point. Yeah.
It's just so automatic. It's like, okay, of course it's like all of those things, but it's just, I found it so funny because it just like, yeah, anyway, so
I've had many of those moments myself, trust
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I believe it's so funny. But since we talked about facilitation, and you've been involved in Coach 2, Coach 3 for several years now, can you talk about overall, because you've gone through a lot of coaches, like there's like that you certified, and just in general, different groups. What do you see in general? What are the things that you see in coaches, whether something they all do, or something they um, maybe something they do, like something really good, or something maybe it's like a trend in a country that we're not doing as good, maybe.
hmm Oh, good question. Um, I would say in the coach, okay, I'm going to say I'll start with one thing maybe that's positive that I see there's like a common trend, and then I'll say something that's maybe more on the something to improve on the
You
positive
see,
side,
I can tell you. Sorry to interrupt. I can tell you're a course facilitator because you're starting with the positive
with the
sandwich type
positive,
of
yeah.
formula here. So good
I'm
job
trying.
there.
I'm trying. Yeah,
That's
thank
it.
you. So I think the common thread that I see that I'm always happily surprised by is that the high performance coaches, so that would be the coach 2 and coach 3 stream, um, they really care and they want to be better. There's very few coaches that come in there and they're like, I know everything. We'll get a couple of those here and there, but for the most part, the coaches are so keen to learn and they want to not just add this certification to their resume, but they actually want to learn the things that make them a coach 2, to learn the things that make them a real coach 3. So that's very positive. People are coming with great attitudes and a lot of passion and want to make their players better. So that's a positive. The other thing I would say, that most coaches come in and maybe they're not as strong in this area is probably technical competencies. And I think that relates to like coaching eye. I think most of the coaches that come through, the thing they really want is like, but tell me how to do it technically. They're like, but how, give me the chart, give me the graph. I want to study it. I don't know technique as much as I would like to know. So there's a lot of that, but I honestly feel like that's a default because in like coach 3, as you know, we talk a lot about mentality and coaches in general are usually leading with technique first when they go onto a tennis court. And, we try to teach tactics first, tactics before technique. And so when they learn that, they're like, wow, and their mind is opened up. But I think they always come really craving more technical knowledge, but maybe because they don't know how to lead with anything else.
But
So,
also, it's a very good point because I see from hiring standpoint and when we're just in the summer club, winter club. So a lot of coaches, even who've been through certification on pretty good level, they're still lacking even in technical knowledge. They may not see everything tactic first, that's fine. Again, it's just like it's a matter of habit, and I understand. But even the technical knowledge is not really there. So which course, and I don't know the answer, but which course, I'm just trying to remember, really goes into technical elements, because I think this is huge. And just for coaches to make that connection, make that link between, okay, this is the tactic I see. What's the simple, most important technical element that I need to correct so that tactic gets better? And not only short term, but also long term. And is it necessary? There's so many questions about it, and that's so sorry. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now because I'm just going on
I
a
understood
little.
Your question.
Okay.
I don't have such a straight answer, to be honest, because we do follow a certain curriculum every time we enter a new year, but it's always customized. Like, what is the group of coaches? What does that group of 30 coaches need?
Yeah.
They need a lot more work on mental. Okay, let's find. They need a lot more work on technical. So we always kind of tweak it. But I would say probably coach 2 is a lot more technique heavy. And then coach 3. Coach 3 is more like there is technical aspect, but it's more about the mentality and coaching mentality. Because by the time you get to, it's more for consolidating players, coach 3. So by the time you get to the consolidating stage, the players should already, for the most part, have their techniques set. And now you're working on developing more of the mindset and the mentality of that player. Whereas under 12 players, which is coach 2, geared towards under 12 players, we're going to do a little bit more technical work there. But I think we could use more. We just run out of time. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to learn. Maybe there could be a completely separate course you take that's just like the fundamentals of technique. Like I would take that course,
Yeah. I just remember maybe I'm off, but I remember me learning about technique more from just asking coaches, not in the course, but just like talking to my former bosses, and talking to somebody just outside of courses, like when I was traveling for Tennis Canada, like asking like coaches from Germany, Japan, and like so all of those things compared to actual certification. And I'm not knocking on certification. I love our certification system, but I'm just thinking like, is there a way for us to integrate it and really like, okay, this is what we're looking for and this is what you fix, and this is, of course, we talked about 5 fundamentals, but it's coaches don't gravitate towards 5 fundamentals. They start talking about, oh, your shoulder, and then
your shoulder angles off,
your rib cage, and then it's like what are we talking about here? Just so complicated. But
I think you're touching on something there. I think there's a desire to learn more about that aspect. So maybe something could be developed to serve that a lot more. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things you get out of coaching certification is like you talk to each other and you share ideas, right? But yeah, it's not technique heavy. It's not, you're right. It's more tactics, more mentality. So
which is great
for it, for sure.
Which I think it's a great message, and 100%. I mean, for us to see the game tactically first is massive, and a lot of people struggle with that, unfortunately. But yeah,
But I think the courses are sorry to interrupt. I think the courses are designed to like develop players.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just, I don't know. I'm not going anywhere with this. I'm just like, we're just, at this point, it's been more than an hour. We're just like, we're just losing our mind talking about, exactly, spitballing here. Anyway, Katy, with that said, I really appreciate you coming to this podcast. I had an absolute blast. It's been really fun talking to you, and thank you for all the knowledge, expertise, and experiences that you shared with us today.
Thank you for having me. I had a blast as well, and I'm really hoping that hopefully some of my lessons or my experiences can help somebody else. That's the most I could ask for. Thank you, Bogdan, and congratulations on your podcast. It's really cool that you have this platform and that you're sharing and you're highlighting all these different people in our industry. So keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.